Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Stuart Corbridge, the VC. Welcome to this second town hall on the topic of Brexit and what it means, mainly for you, but also for family members, friends, the university more generally. We were going to do another meeting down at the Queen's campus in Stockton, but we've got very few people signing up for that, so we are going to video the first part of this presentation so that colleagues there can see the presentation. We're not planning to video the question and answers, so colleagues can sort of speak freely knowing that they're not going to be taped. And of course, David Cowling and I will make it clear, and colleagues to my right who will introduce themselves shortly when we have the panel discussion, that we're very happy to go down as individuals to Stockton to talk to people about their concerns. And that's fundamentally the reason for scheduling this second town hall meeting. I will just go through a short set of slides. I think there are about 10 fairly obvious ones to begin with. We're then planning a panel discussion and question and answer with my colleagues in order: Andrew, Fiona, Danny, Claire and Sam, who've all got their names in front of them. We've got a couple of microphones to come round, although you won't, as I say, be videotaped at that time. And my colleagues are more expert in some of the areas that will be of concern to you than I am. But we're also here to listen and to learn. I want to know what's on your minds. Of course, we've got a pretty good sense of that, how you think things have moved on. If you're aware of things that other universities are doing that we're not doing, it would be good to get a sense of that so that we can try to respond as best we can to the concerns that you might have. We try to take the opportunity at every occasion, of course, just to make it clear that Brexit is not something that British universities looked for. I have said that in a message to all alumni. It didn't go down with every single member of the alumni community, it's fair to say, but we flourish as a university, of course, because we're inclusive and outward looking. So whilst this set of events has particular implications, presumably for the people that are in the room, it also has very major implications for a university like Durham, or the universities in the Northeast. And I mention the Northeast because we are trying our best to work with the other 4 universities in the Northeast to lobby both regionally and nationally. So a letter is going to go out from the 4 northeastern VCs later today, I think at about 4:30, to all of our leading MPs, members of the LEPs, members of the business community. It's been signed by the VCs of Durham, Newcastle, Northumbria and Sunderland, and a separate one because we're in a separate LEP with Teesside, in accordance with the letter that's been drawn up by Universities UK, to make a more general statement about the importance of being able to access the international student community for our universities, for the region and nationally. The Russell Group is also active, and the way that that tends to work is probably a little bit more behind closed doors. I was at the Russell Group VC's meeting about 10 days ago, and the guest of honour in the evening was Joe Johnson, university's minister. So there was an opportunity there to make a number of points to the minister, and he gave us some advice in return about how to lobby the government. And Sir David Greenaway, who's the head of the Russell Group, and Wendy Peart, the Director General, meet with the minister on a fairly regular basis, I think every couple of weeks, to relay concerns. We've set up, I think as everybody knows, a Brexit steering group in the university, which largely comprises colleagues to my right, also taking in advice from legals, so that we're in a position as best we can to monitor events, to get a sense of what is going on at other universities, although, as I say, we would look to you for further advice and information, and to see if we can adapt our own policies in a way that would be helpful to staff and students. And we are going to hold town hall events this term with the student community. And there's now a dedicated Brexit microsite that provides, we hope, some useful information and updates both to staff members and of course their family, friends and dependents and students. The main updates since we met last time, of course, from UUK, which has been lobbying, I think, quite actively under Nicola Dandridge around the EU and international students. The main area of campaign at the moment, I think, for the Russell Group and for UUK is highlighting the value, of course, of all EU staff, but urging the UK government to guarantee that those currently working at UK universities and their dependents can continue to do so after the UK exit the EU. So we're working on the assumption now that Article 50 will of course be triggered by the end of March next year. The Prime Minister reaffirmed that last night as she departed for India. That does suggest, I think most of us, I assume, would agree that some sense of what the architecture of Brexit might mean will now have to come to Parliament in January or February next year, as long as the High Court ruling of last week is affirmed by the Supreme Court. I think that's meeting on the 7th and 8th of December. But I think the general view now is that it would be unlikely for the Supreme Court to overturn the High Court judgment, notwithstanding the efforts of certain newspapers to ensure that it does. So we hope to have a lot more clarity in the country, obviously, in the earlier part of next year, and then some fairly interesting parliamentary scrutiny. The government, of course, has refused so far to guarantee the rights that we're asking for there, or the UK is in that first bullet point. It continues to maintain that this would weaken the hand of government in its negotiations with the EU. The second area that the UK has been active in terms of campaigns has been around EU funding for research and innovation. We've got Andrew Jackson with us, and Andrew can take questions and elaborate on this in more detail later. But European Commission research grants, including the Horizon 2020 programme grants and European structural investment funds awarded whilst the UK is still a member of the EU, will now be guaranteed by the Treasury. And that will be the case even when the research project continues beyond the UK's date of departure from the EU, whenever that is. In terms of colleagues here to help you in HR, Claire will speak to this later, we have appointed Halliday Reeves, which is described here as a niche immigration law firm, to run seminars for colleagues. The first one took place on the 2nd of November. Another is scheduled for the 16th of November. We hope that those will be of use to colleagues, and Claire will talk about this in more detail in a moment. We hope also soon to follow, for example, Cambridge in setting up a template letter for colleagues wishing to apply for permanent residency. And we hope to host this very soon on the Durham University Brexit microsite. Happy to make all of these slides obviously available to colleagues afterwards. Research, Andrew tells me that we are seeing a significant uplift in engagement with the EU funding sources amongst Durham academics at the moment, and particularly since the Chancellor of the Exchequer's announcement about Horizon 2020. So that's what we were hoping we would see, but we would still encourage Durham colleagues on the academic and research tracks to continue applying for EU research funding as long as the UK remains eligible to access that funding. And Andrew's here to talk you through that later on if anybody's got any questions on that. The International Office, we've got Danny Donoghue, the Dean for Internationalisation. One of the things that's going to come up, Danny, I think, when we talk to the students is the Erasmus programme. In particular, we've got Fiona here as well. So we've secured a total of 1.2 million euros from the Erasmus Plus programme for academic year 2016-17. We actually were audited by the British Council last week in respect of Erasmus Plus. We are a major player in the Erasmus programme, certainly within a UK context. It's something that is strategically important for the university. But if the programme is discontinued, then obviously the university will have to take a decision about how and to what extent we would underwrite the programme ourselves. And a paper's coming to UEC on that very shortly. The British Council has also guaranteed that the Erasmus Plus programme will continue in 2017-18. And as I say, UEC will shortly be reviewing underwrite options in the case that funding dries up from outside and we choose to do this ourselves. Conscious that we should get to questions as quickly as possible. Hate crimes, they're still continuing. I think the numbers have dropped since shortly after the referendum in this part of the country, but we've had reports both in Durham City and in the Newcastle area and in the surrounding villages. If you're aware of anything in that area, let us know. We refer it to the police. It's a sign, of course, of continuing tensions. It's very difficult for people to live with this degree of antagonistic behaviour in some communities, so we're here to support you and refer it to the authorities. In terms of people moving out of the UK, whilst I can't mention names, I am aware of 2 colleagues on the academic side that are choosing to make their careers elsewhere in Europe, the rest of the EU as we should currently describe it. So that I think was always on the cards. It's a clear downside of where we are, and it speaks, I think, to the fact that people are feeling very obviously a huge amount of anxiety and uncertainty about their futures, and it's difficult to see that we'll get much clarity on this until early in 2017. Of course, all of this is going to affect the university too in terms of our reputation. I think the UK is very much in danger of getting a reputation for being more closed than previously was the case. And we will wait to see how this affects both staff applying to work with us in the future and also students. I think it's fair to say, Sam, we've not seen a decline in applications so far from EU students. But then again, we didn't expect to whilst the funding was in place. But we might see a change in this coming year. Perhaps you can pick this up in a moment. And it might be manifested differently across the university in terms of undergraduates, postgraduates, and PGR. But of course, it's not just EU students that we are looking at. It's the effect upon international students more generally at a time when the university is committed to increasing the percentage of international students at the university. So lastly, just in terms of getting us going today, there is information available at the Brexit microsite. So if you haven't seen it before, the link is there. And as I said at the beginning, as we move now to question and answer session with the panel members, we're also very keen to get a sense of where you are on these issues, and if you're getting a sense of best practice elsewhere that we're not effecting in Durham, let us know. We'll do our best then to improve our practices.